By noon the wire hit, and the house went bright and loud. Her phone kept chiming on the counter like a toy bomb. Reporters wanted a quote. Old classmates wanted a memory. Strangers wanted a piece of the miracle. Ava didn't look at me when she said it. I'm done being parented. She was still in the sweatshirt she used to steal from my closet, the one with the paint smear on the cuff, but her voice had a new metal edge. I kept my hands flat on the cool marble and tried to remember to breathe through my nose. You're tired, I said. Let it settle. It is settled, she said, and lifted her eyes like she'd practiced it in a mirror. Dad, I want the house. I want space. There are words that age a man instantly. I felt something behind my ribs sit down and turn its face to the wall. It's your name on the deed, too, I managed. You don't have to explain. A security guy I'd never seen before hovered in the doorway, pretending to check his phone. A floral delivery arrived, 2 vases taller than I am. The kitchen filled with a sweet, hospital smell of lilies. Ava signed for them with her new scrawl, the loose celebrity signature someone taught her overnight. I went upstairs and took the duffel from the top shelf, the one I used for camping trips and emergency rooms. Socks, a razor, 2 shirts, the battered copy of her first cap table I'd kept like a relic. I stood in her old room before I left, the bed too neatly made, the wall where the taped-up awards had left little pale rectangles in the paint. The window still stuck on the left track, because I'd always said I'd fix it, and then we'd learn to live with it. At the door she hugged me, quick and sideways, the polite hug of a busy person. Her hair smelled like the expensive shampoo the stylist had pushed on her the day the investor photos were taken. Don't worry, she said, and I understood I'd taught her that line too. She was comforting me the way I used to comfort her, by skipping the part where we told the truth. I slipped the spare key into my pocket without thinking. It was habit, not a plan. A small, cold shape that meant history more than access. I knew I wouldn't use it. I knew using it would turn me into something I didn't want to be. Outside, the sun had the brittle shine of early winter. I put the duffel in the trunk and closed it gently, like noise might break what was left. When I looked back, I saw her through the glass, already on another call, laughing with teeth I paid for, ring light casting a halo I didn't recognize. The door locked itself with a soft click. It sounded like a timer starting. The motel TV made everything look cheaper, even her. They ran the same sunlit photo on every channel. Ava on the steps of the courthouse, chin lifted, blazer that fit her like it had been memorized by a machine. A lower third chirped Wunderkind. Someone said she had rewired an industry. I ate dinner out of a vending machine and watched her become the kind of person strangers defend to the death online. The anchors called it a valuation. I called it a number too big to sit still. The panelists talked about her, found her story, like it was a folk song that had always existed, and I realized the pieces that didn't test well had been cut. The night she coded on our kitchen table, the way her wrists ached from typing, the months she almost quit. In their version, she was born in a corner office with a whiteboard and a ring light, fully formed. Her phone, which I no longer paid for, found me anyway. Photos slid across the feed. Ava at a rooftop with a view of a city we couldn't afford last year. Ava at a table where the stemware looked like medical equipment. Ava between a manager with the posture of a metronome and a woman with a jawline as sharp as a judge's gavel. The caption said, "Team family, blessed." I tried to be the kind of father who could be proud from anywhere. A message pinged from a number I didn't recognize. A grainy shot of her left hand under a candle, diamond like a searchlight. The text said, she said yes. I could not tell if I was in the exclamation points or outside them. Moments later, a gossip account posted his name. He had one of those faces that upgrade every room, and a resume that read like a brochure, angel investor, philanthropist, something in climate. I pictured his handshake, practiced to feel like truth. The manager appeared in interviews within hours. He spoke about protecting her time, the way a bouncer talks about fire codes. He used phrases that belonged on invoices, monetize, pipeline, scale. Her old friends reassembled themselves into a parade. A few who never called me Mr. anything started calling me Sir, as if grief, too, could be branded. I turned the sound down and watched in captions. Pleased to announce. Beyond excited. Couldn't have done it without. The motel's ice machine coughed through the wall like a sick animal. In the bathroom mirror, I looked like a man who had finally met his age. Pride and unease took turns in my chest, like exes sharing a hallway. I kept thinking of the first time I taught her to ride a bike, how I ran alongside and lied. "I've got you," long after I let go. On the screen, she was pedaling into a sky made of confetti, a city cheering like it would never stop. I folded the spare key in my palm and reminded myself, applause is not the same thing as balance. They answered on the first ring, when the papers needed a childhood quote. After that, silence learned my number by heart. The PR handler's name was Bree, short for something longer and softer I was never allowed to use. She left one chirpy voicemail about aligning narratives, and then moved me to email, where replies arrived like weather alerts, terse, branded, and signed from a team. When I called, I got music that sounded like a yacht doing laps. When I showed up, I got Kellen. He wore the kind of suit that makes other suits apologize. Young, handsome in a way that had been ironed flat, he met me on the front steps of my daughter's new glass house with a smile that felt like paperwork. "We're really trying to protect her time," he said, which is what people say before they take some of yours. Behind him, a man in a polo stood with a tablet, pretending he wasn't a wall. "I'm her father," I said, and heard in my own voice the old entitlement I'd raised her to resist. The smile didn't move. He gestured to a clipboard where my name had been spelled correctly, a small courtesy that hurt more. "We'll get something on the calendar," he said, and the door sealed itself with a climate-controlled sigh. They recarpeted her life and passwords. The Wi-Fi name changed to a Latin phrase. The thermostat app kicked me out. Family photo backups lost me like a passport. An NDA arrived in my inbox with all the warmth of a subpoena. "Standard," Bree said in a bubble speech when I asked. "We're just preventing leaks." I signed nothing and felt like a leaking thing anyway. Once, I left a casserole at the gate, old ritual trying to talk to new money. The security guard accepted it like contraband and carried it in with 2 hands, as if love might explode. A day later a courier brought it back, untouched, in a branded foil pan with a sticker that read, in small print, "No outside food." The same courier slid over a document asking me not to approach the property without notice. "It's not personal," he said, which is the oldest lie we know. Kellen called me, "Sir," on our second meeting and, "My friend," on our third. He said Ava was thriving, said I should be proud of the velocity. I watched his eyes flick to the security camera as he talked, the way a man checks a mirror to make sure he still exists. He handed me a laminated contact sheet with emergency numbers that led to people who did not know my daughter's middle name. If I needed anything, he said, I could go through him. The way he said through made him sound like a tunnel without an exit. On the curb, the sprinklers came on exactly at 6, mist cooling my shins. Behind the hedges I heard my daughter laugh, the sound filtered by glass and policy until I couldn't tell if it was happy. I kept the spare key in my pocket like a superstition and told myself keys don't open doors that have decided to forget you. I drafted and deleted it 5 times, because fathers don't get edits once they hit send. The first version was long and hoarse with history. The second was all business, like a memo to a client who once wore dinosaur pajamas. The third tried to be funny and forgave itself halfway through. In the end, I stripped it to bone. Money attracts heat. Verify everyone. I added a period because I wanted it to land like a hand on a shoulder, not a plea. The dots bubbled, disappeared, came back. Her reply was a thumbs up and a champagne bottle, 2 cartoons clinking in a sky that didn't have weather. I stared at the little icons until they stopped meaning anything. Somewhere, a designer had picked that exact shade of gold to feel like victory. Somewhere else, the man who loved her this week had taught her which emojis said we're good without actually saying it. I almost followed up with the list I kept in my head, the questions you ask a manager who smiles too much, the way you read a term sheet for the clause that hides in the footnotes, the fact that people who talk about protecting your time are often trying to spend it for you. But I heard my father's voice in the corner of the room, the one that taught me how warnings can turn into arguments that don't know how to stop. So I put the phone face down and listened to the motel's plumbing complain through the wall like an old man on porch duty. Her feed bloomed with congratulation. New friends appeared in strategic lighting, arms draped with practiced ease, captions tuned to gratitude and momentum. I recognized the look of people who had found a son and arranged their leaves. In a photo carouseling by, she held a flute of something that could have been celebration or camouflage. The ring flashed like a lighthouse trying to save a ship that didn't know it was lost yet. I went for a walk to shrink the room. The strip mall smelled like fried sugar and tax preparation. A teenager in a company polo was waging war with a row of shopping carts. A woman was teaching her toddler to step over the parking lot paint as if it were a river. Regular life made a steady noise I could stand. I thought about how many times I'd said be careful, and how often that sentence turns into be careful of me. Back in the room, the phone lay where I'd left it, glass reflecting the orange vacancy of the sign outside. No new messages. No storm yet, just the pressure change you feel when a friend is building over some distance you can't see. I scrolled up through our thread, photos of a prototype on a napkin, a late night. It finally works. A video of her laughing with her mouth full at our old kitchen table. All the proof that we were real to each other once. I typed, proud of you, kid. Deleted it. Typed, call me if anything feels off. Deleted that too. I turned the screen dark and let the room go quiet. Warnings have weight, but they don't have wings. You throw them, and they land where the wind allows. The realtor's drone video made the house look like a spaceship that had decided to land in a zip code. All glass and angles, no memory anywhere for dust to settle. Ava toured it on a live stream with a host who said, natural light, so many times it stopped sounding like English. By afternoon, the offer was accepted, a number that could have paved our entire neighborhood in quartz. She posted a key on her story, a silver tooth on her palm, captioned with a glittering word that wasn't home. The car came next, old enough to count as charm. A vintage coupe with leather the color of a well-worn wallet, lines so clean they could shave you. It roared like an apology to every practical thing we'd ever driven. She slid behind the wheel like she'd been born with a gearshift in her hand. Kellen posed near the hood, but not touching, the way you orbit a star that doesn't know you're using its light. He talked to her about tax-advantaged vehicles, with the tenderness other men reserve for poetry. Opportunity zones, carried interest, trust that sounded like lullabies for money. He spread documents on a table, so clear you could see your uncertainty in it. This shelters, this offsets, this defers, he said, tapping lines I wanted to read at half speed. A lawyer with a jaw like a clasp nodded rhythmically, punctuating the pitch with initials that formed their own alphabet soup. I tried to imagine explaining depreciation to the girl who used to count the quarters in a mason jar for Friday pizza. I stayed quiet and went home to work the only lever I had, memory with proof. I pulled the banker's box from the back of the closet, the one with the scrawl, Ava Early, on its side. I laid out the startup's ancestry on my bed, receipts with coffee stains, the first hosting bills, a printout of an email where she argued for her own salary and lost. Contracts we'd printed at 2 a.m. because the library closed early that week. A napkin with the first architecture sketch, arrows and exclamation points like fireworks. I dated everything in pencil again, a second timestamp for a future judge. The motel table bowed under the paper like a boat taking on the right kind of water. I photographed each page and saved copies to 2 drives, labeled them like a man who has learned the hard way what people forget on purpose. Every few minutes my phone blinked with updates from her new life. A chef's tasting that looked like edible jewelry, a hallway so white it could forgive anything, a candid of her fiancé pouring wine as if gravity worked differently for him. I wanted to send one picture back. Her first invoice, $600, net 30, the victory that bought us those pizza Fridays. Instead I filed it. Outside, the vacancy sign hummed, and the ice machine had another opinion. Kellen's vehicles would carry her money away from weather. Mine were old shoeboxes and cheap plastic, the kind that float when the flood comes. I stacked them neatly and waited for the water to rise or pass. By morning the shine had fingerprints. The first email came from a vendor with a logo that tried too hard. Could we confirm the amended wiring instructions for last week's install? The attachment showed a routing number I'd never seen, and a Cayman P.O. box that definitely wasn't on the original invoice. I checked my copies, the ones with the coffee ring and the hand-scribbled, paid, and felt my stomach do the math. Someone had swapped the end of the pipe. Another message followed from a different contractor, same polite panic wearing a different font. Their accounts receivable showed a discount for early settlement. We had never negotiated, with funds routed through an LLC named like a lullaby. I called the main line and got a receptionist reading off a script about new payment partners. When I asked for the owner, she said he was on site in Monaco. The hold music sounded like an elevator in a very rich hospital. Around lunch, my phone blinked with a DM from a kid I remembered for his nervous laugh and a hoodie with sleeves chewed at the cuffs. "Hey, Mr. R," it began, the mashup title teenage engineers give to any man over 40. He apologized for reaching out, said he'd been locked out of the Git repo. "Whole team's permissions changed last night," he wrote. "Kellen's people say we're moving to enterprise-grade infrastructure and repackaging IP under a new parent. Do you know about this?" I asked for screenshots, and he sent them like a witness. Admin panels with red banners, access revoked, project transferred. New owner, a Delaware thing with a name that could hide in a crowd. In the commit history, whole directories disappeared in chunks, replaced by a mirrored scaffold that looked identical until you measured the missing teeth. He wrote, "They said we'll get new contracts if we're aligned with the vision." I could hear the air quotes through the screen. I thanked him and told him to back up what he could without breaking laws he'd never been paid enough to learn. He replied with a thumbs up and a midnight frowny face. I stared at the icons until they felt like bad weather. I forwarded the wire anomalies to the general inbox at the bank and to the one compliance officer I trusted, subject line, potential payment redirection. Then I printed everything, because paper can't be edited by a man 3 time zones away in a room with no windows. The motel printer coughed and left a faint line down the margin like a scar. On her feed, the house looked perfect. Sun poured itself over stone like money learning to be a verb. She stood between the fiancé and Kellen on a balcony that wanted a drone captioned, "Building something bigger," with a gold lock emoji. I folded the printouts and slid them into the banker's box, my hands moving like I was packing a parachute. Somewhere, invisible hands were rearranging labels on the doors, and the building was still called the same thing. You don't need a crack meter to know when glass is under stress. You just have to listen for the sound it makes right before it remembers how to break. The call came before sunrise, a number I recognized from the bank's lobby when we used to count overdraft fees like hail dents. Her voice was thin and mechanical, a compliance officer reading from the part of her job that made people stop breathing. She said, "Provisional hold," and "AML review," and "pattern inconsistent with historical activity." I pictured a spreadsheet becoming suspicious in real time, cells going yellow, then red, as 6-figure transfers hopped like stones across a river into companies with names that sounded like lullabies for ghosts. I thanked her the way a man thanks a stranger for telling him his house is smoking. Before I could dial Ava, my screen lit with Kellen's broadcast message to stakeholders, the word he used when he wanted you to feel included and irrelevant at the same time. He blamed overcautious banks crippling innovation, said traditional rails were allergic to velocity, promised they were already opening resilient corridors. I knew enough to translate. He wanted to move the money somewhere less curious. FaceTimed me from a kitchen that looked like a laboratory. Her makeup was perfect, the way panic sometimes paints itself as control. "They froze it," she said, jaw tight, voice pitched high like she was balancing a glass of water on her head. "Just the main account," they said. "For clarification." "Clarify," I said. "Where did the wires go?" She swiped through notifications, like someone looking for a lost friend. "Consulting fees, SPV funding, vendor prepayments," she read aloud. The destinations were Delaware, Wyoming, British Virgin Islands. Shells within shells, addresses that housed dozens of companies, and not a single soul. I asked who approved them, and the pause was long enough for the ring light to catch up. "Kellen's team," she said. "We have controls." The last word was a question dressed as a period. He arrived on cue, stepping into the frame with that weightless smile. "Legacy institutions," he said, as if the bank were a stubborn uncle. "They'll unfreeze once they realize this isn't laundering, it's optimization. Meanwhile, we shouldn't be dependent on rails designed in the 1970s. He pitched the bridge like a vacation. Instant settlement, cross-chain liquidity, custody handled by a boutique desk. Words that turned friction into romance. I asked about KYC and travel rules, and what exactly the boutique bridged to when the lights went out. He never broke eye contact with the camera. "You worry too much," he said, and I saw Ava's shoulders relax by obedience. I told her to ask for a full activity report and to lock outbound transfers until the review cleared. Kellen's smile bit a degree. "We can't go dark," he said, soft enough to sound reasonable. "Vendors need to be paid. Momentum must be maintained." "Momentum is what knocks you down the stairs," I said, but I sounded like a man quoting a manual no one had issued in years. After the call, I drove to the bank because paper still respects a lobby. I handed over the anomalies I'd printed, my notes, in the margins like footprints. The compliance officer met me in a side room with a plant that hadn't been watered right. She nodded at the LLCs, circled 3 that lived inside one another, and said, "You're not wrong." Back at the motel, the vacancy sign buzzed a tired neon sermon. On her feed, Ava posted a photo of the sunset off her balcony, captioned, "Storms pass," with a little rainbow. Kellen reposted with a lightning bolt, then a rocket. I pinned the bank's business card above the desk and watched the bridge's symbol in their language, a promise that the river wasn't real. The trick of a freeze is it teaches you what moves when you stop. It arrived in a cream envelope with a return address that looked like it had never seen rain. The courier asked for a signature and didn't meet my eyes, the way men don't look at you when they're handing over a bad test result. Inside, letterhead that had been practiced into intimidation, paragraphs stacked like sandbags, and a sentence that did its work without raising its voice. Cease. Desist. An accusation with a timestamp older than my daughter's first cap table. The core algorithm predates her company, belongs to a rival who had suddenly remembered their own brilliance. I read it twice, then once aloud to the empty room, as if saying it would make it less absurd. They claimed provenance through a contractor's NDA I'd never seen, an internal memo from a date that felt like a dare, a folder of exhibits with names that sounded like they were printed after the fact. I felt the quick, clean anger of a man who knows exactly where the bodies are because he dug the holes for the fence posts himself. I pulled the banker's box from under the motel desk like a magician with only one trick. Out came the notebooks, the cheap kind with the cardboard covers and wire that always snags your sleeve. On the inside of the first I'd written the date in ink that had faded to a tired blue. The night she explained the kernel to me with a salt shaker and 3 bottle caps. I had sketched it, the feature extraction, the feedback loop, her little exploding star doodle next to the threshold that didn't exist until she invented it. Pages later, a note in my handwriting. Ask her about edge cases with sparse labels. A grocery list on the back of an equation. You don't forget the mess when you were there for the cleaning. I photographed everything with the careful hands you use on an heirloom. Then I texted Ava, "Call me now." She answered from the mansion's west-facing room, light so perfect it looked artificial. The letter had already bloomed across her screen. Her fiancé drifted into frame, hand on her shoulder like he'd chiseled it there. He wore the expression of a man who believes in solutions because they're faster than facts. "It's noise," he said, eyes bright as if the word were a charm. "Settle fast. Keep the party moving. You don't pause your life for trolls." He used that tone designed to get to yes by making every no sound small. "It's not a troll," I said. "It's a fuse. And we own the water." I held up the notebook to the camera. Ava leaned in, squinting the way she used to when she was trying to see the last step in a proof. I flipped to the page with the date written twice, once in pen and once later in pencil, when I'd been scared the ink might disappear. Her mouth softened, a private muscle memory. He squeezed her shoulder, as if gently steering a car out of a skid. "Babe," he murmured, "this is a distraction." "Distractions don't come certified mail," I said. "They come with glitter." She exhaled like a tire losing air. "Kellen says we can wrap it for under 7 figures, she said, as if quoting a menu. "Or we can end it," I said. "I can show chain of custody. Get logs, email threads, these pages. We don't pay people to borrow our past." Silence held the room just long enough to be its own participant. Outside her window, the sun dropped behind a palm and turned the glass gold. In my motel, the neon vacancy flickered a verdict I didn't ask for. She nodded, small, almost a secret. The fiancé's smile thinned by a millimeter. For the first time in days, The party sounded like a place with a door you could close. The party was the kind that pretends to be casual. Bare feet on polished stone. A DJ who pretended not to be paid. Trays of food that looked like jewelry. Phones held the room together like scaffolding. I stood at the edge long enough to be mistaken for staff twice, and then remembered I wasn't invited. Someone had strung white bulbs across the pool so the water wore a necklace. Around midnight, a rumor started as a smudge. Where's the little black thing? It rolled through the house with the efficient speed of bad weather. The security team did their calm choreography, palms up, voices low. Ava's face lost its brightness 1 pixel at a time. Kellen found me on the patio as if I were a useful item misfiled. Minor misplacement, he said, smile tethered to its stake. We're on redundancy. The hardware wallet had lived in a drawer she thought was clever. It had a name in her head, a superstition, a pet. When she opened the drawer and found only air, I saw the exact moment belief loses its chair. She went for the emergency backups, the way you go for a fire extinguisher expecting powder and getting confetti. The first metal plate was gone from the safe behind a wall that had sworn it was impenetrable. The second was in its case, but the words were scrambled, like someone had learned the alphabet and rearranged it to be cruel. Cloud, she said, a last incantation. We crowded around her phone as she opened the folder labeled with a joke no one else would get. The photo that had once been neat rows of words was now static, television snow in a world that no longer had antennas. Every tap produced the same soft hiss of nothing. Someone had replaced the key with absence, and absence was suddenly exhaustingly heavy. Kellen spoke in procedures. Incident reports, forensics, chain of custody. A guard questioned the bartender, as if limes could testify. The fiancé kept an arm around her that looked like comfort until you noticed it was also a claim. We'll recover, he said to the air more than to her. There are services. Not for seeds that never were, I said. No one answered, because the sentence had no good place to sit. Guests stripped away, shoes in hand, the way people exit a church after a fire drill. The DJ unspooled silence. Somewhere a glass broke with theatrical timing. Ava sat at the kitchen island that had recently hosted laughter in tiny cakes, staring at the dead image as if willingness could resurrect pixels. I remembered labeling shoe boxes with a Sharpie, duplicating receipts, like a man copying his own breath. She had been teaching me to trust new things. I had been hoarding the old. Who had the drawer? I asked. Her eyes flicked to the security camera in the ceiling, a black button that had watched everything and seen nothing. Kellen listed names that were all first names, and the list felt like a tide. In the quiet after they stopped pretending it was fixable, she looked at me without the armor the house gave her. Dad, she said, no emoji, no timeline. It wasn't a question or an apology. It was the sound you make when you realize the door you walk through isn't a door anymore, it's a wall. I put my hand on the counter between us, not touching her, just letting the marble carry the weight I couldn't. By dawn the house had a new personality. Compliant, obedient, airtight. A memo went out from someone with a title that begins and ends with capital letters. Isolation protocol, it said. For Ava's safety. Codes changed mid-swipe. The gate learned a new alphabet and forgot the old one. 2 guards I'd never seen before stood at the end of the drive with the posture of refrigerators. Delivery people were turned away like weather. Even the dog walker had to schedule his affection. Inside, her phone became a curated museum. Numbers she'd known since middle school were suddenly restricted. Old threads vanished into archive vaults. The favorites list showed a haircut of her life. Kellen, the fiancé, the PR handler, a concierge doctor with a glossy website, an on-call driver named after a saint. She tried to text me and watched the bubble turn green and then gray, as if love had to route through customs now. Bree posted a statement that sounded like cotton. Ava is taking time offline to focus on what matters. The comments poured in, a tide of hearts and crown emojis. I read it on the motel bed and could hear the house sealing itself, a submarine deciding which compartments to flood. The spare key in my pocket felt like a punchline told by a locksmith. At 9:17 her name lit up my phone, but the number was new, raw, no caller ID. Dad? She said, small and startled, like a person who recognizes her own reflection after a long illness. The line was thin as thread. I'm here, I said. Where are you? Laundry room, she whispered, which felt right. They changed everything. I can't. The sound dipped as if someone had walked between us. Borrowed a phone from the florist. He was dropping. The sentence broke. A door opened near her, and I heard the synthetic courtesy of security voices. Miss Ava, we've got you. Don't hang up, I said uselessly. Ask for the activity reports. Tell the bank. Static. Then nothing. The number, when I called it back, announced itself as no longer in service, which is a special trick when the service is people. I stared at the wall as if I could will a door into it. My thumb hovered over Kellen's contact and moved away, like a cat refusing to touch tinfoil. I drove to the gate because that's what you do when you're from the century of showing up. A new tablet told the new guard that I was not on the list. He softened his eyes the way professionals do when they're about to be immovable. It's for her safety, he said, and I believe the part where safety meant someone else deciding where your edges are. On the way back, I pulled over under a billboard that promised a better kind of silence if you paid for it. I called the bank, left another message for compliance, then sent a text to the number that didn't work anymore. I'm here. I know the old ways. Remember the old ways. The message went nowhere, which was exactly where I was. The gala had the acoustics of money, laughter traveling farther than it deserved, glassware tuning itself. A screen taller than our first apartment cycled through logos, while a woman in a sequin jumpsuit told us we were witnessing a new chapter. I stood in the back with the florists and the fire code, hands in my pockets, like a man who'd misplaced his century. Ava was on stage in a dress that moved like it knew choreography. Kellen flanked her, a perfect parenthesis. They launched something with a name that tasted like peppermint. The crowd clapped on cue. I watched the slide that wasn't meant for me, a blink-and-miss budget wedge with advisory, fattened beyond nutrition. I thought of the vendors with wrong wiring instructions, the kid who'd lost his repo keys, the wallet that had gone Houdini. When the music swelled and the lights lifted, I threaded through bodies perfumed to suggest forests and oceans. Kellen saw me coming the way a lifeguard spots a rip current. Sir, he said, warm set to medium. Enjoying the evening? Quick one, I said, keeping my voice friendly enough to pass security sniff tests. The $4.2 million consulting retainer. Who's the consultant? The smile on his face worked too hard, like a muscle overtrained for selfies. We have multiple specialized partners, he said. World class. Name one, I said. He let the smile relax, then tighten again, a twitch he couldn't help. As you can imagine, we respect confidentiality. Imagine harder, I said. Ava's paying it. That makes it not confidential to me. He tilted his head the way you do when a dog has learned a new trick. This isn't the place. It's exactly the place, I said, because the room had mirrors and microphones and people who could afford to remember. Is the retainer going to the same structure that redirected vendor payments? Or the one that owns the repackaged IP? For a second, he went blank. No loading icon, just white space. Then the smile came back, brighter, faker, like a flashlight in a fog machine. You should be proud, he said, leaning in as if delivering tenderness. She's building at pace most can't process. Pace is not an alibi, I said. Name's Kellen, who invoices for $350,000 a month to whisper the obvious. He glanced over my shoulder and raised a couple of fingers. I felt the change in air before I saw the men in black suits materialize, polite as priests. Let's not make a scene, he said softly, like a lullaby. Ava has enough on her plate. She has your plate, I said. And your fork. I tried to step around him. The nearest guard's hand hovered 6 inches from my elbow, respectful and absolute. Across the room, Ava was thanking the crowd, light scattering off her earrings like coded signals. Our eyes caught for a heartbeat. I lifted an index finger, as if asking to speak in class. The guard's hand found my elbow and turned me toward the exit, so gently it felt like courtesy until the door hit air. Outside, the night had that practice cool of rented coastal weather. The door latched behind me with a click I knew better than my own name. Through the glass, I could still see the stage, shapes moving with the confidence of amplified sound. My phone buzzed, an automated message from the valet stand asking for my ticket number. I texted back the only number that mattered. No reply. A minute later, 2 security men followed me to the curb, one carrying the kind of smile that says he will remember me in case remembering becomes useful. As the car slid up, I looked at the building and thought of the word gala, how it sounds like a fruit until you bite it and find wires. I got in and shut the door on the music. The driver adjusted the mirror. "Big night?" he asked. "Bigger than it knows," I said, and watched the lights recede in the glass like a story deciding how it wants to end. The parking lot was the kind of empty that makes its own weather. Dawn peeled the sky open with 2 fingers, and the neon open sign buzzed at nobody. I parked by the carts and pretended to read a receipt I'd already memorized. She came out from between 2 SUVs like a deer that had learned how doors work. Hoodie up, sunglasses doing a bad job of pretending the night hadn't been cruel. When she reached me, she took the glasses off. Her eyes were swollen, raw at the rims, the way a person looks after arguing with a locked door. "I need your help," she said, and the words shivered even though the air didn't. "I don't know who to trust. There are sentences that rewire your spine." I nodded and did the thing I know, made the space quiet. "Okay," I said. "Start with what hurts." She looked around like the asphalt had ears. "They're saying I authorized transfers I've never seen. The bank wants meetings with people I've never met. The fiancé is—" She stopped and pinched the bridge of her nose. "He says I'm catastrophizing. That this is a test of leadership. What about your accounts?" I asked. "Still frozen," she said. "Kellen has operational funds in a different structure. He says we're fine. He says I should post something upbeat." She laughed once, a sound with no place to land. "I can't get to my emails. Bree says it's a temporary comms transition. The devs are texting me from personal numbers with questions I can't answer because I don't know where our code is." Her hands were shaking. I reached into the back seat and handed her the paper cup of coffee I'd been saving for the version of this morning that needed it. She drank like it was medicine and flinched at the heat. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, voice small. "About the house. About everything that wasn't this minute. We can inventory apologies later," I said. "Right now we triage." She wiped her face with the sleeve and nodded like a student told the exam is open book. I unlocked the glove compartment and pulled out a folder, the photocopies of the notebooks, the vendor anomalies, the list of LLCs that nested like Russian dolls. I laid them on the dashboard like a map for a country that denies it exists. "We go to ground on 3 things," I said. "Authorship, money flow, access." The old coach in me surfaced, the one who used to time her sprints with a dollar store stopwatch. "I've got dated proof of the algorithm. We'll get a sworn statement from the junior dev. We will walk the bank through every redirected wire until someone in compliance runs out of highlighter. And we change your locks, not the doors, the people." She exhaled, not relief, but a version of air she could use. "If they see me with you, they can see," I said. "They already have cameras. Let them film a father." A truck rumbled past, and the smell of bread rolled out from the bakery like kindness. She slid into the passenger seat and hugged the folder to her chest as if it could warm her. "Tell me where to go," she said. "First stop," I said, turning the key, feeling the engine choose to be brave, "is a place where a notary opens at 8 and the truth opens earlier." She closed her eyes and leaned her head on the window, the glass cold and honest. Sunlight climbed the edge of the lot. Somewhere behind us, the house realized it had lost something it thought it owned. We pulled out anyway. We built the plan in a coffee shop that hadn't learned to be impressed. Sticky tables, a chalkboard menu where the oat milk was always out. Ava kept her hood up and her eyes on the door. I lined the paperwork between the salt and pepper like I was setting a table for a finicky guest. The signed founder agreements with her original co-founder's neat little signature, the invention notebooks with dates written twice, and a drive image burned to a dull aluminum brick, label scrawled in my block letters. Evidence that smelled like toner and insomnia. Marianne, the first lawyer who ever returned our calls before there was money to bill, slid into the booth, hair up, briefcase older than some of our mistakes. "You brought the bones," she said, flipping through the founder agreements, tapping a clause with the satisfaction of a woman finding a lost key. Assignment of inventions. Contemporaneous notes. Chain of custody. She looked at Ava with a warmth that didn't curtsy. You made this. We can prove it. Theo, the junior dev, arrived late and breathless, laptop hugged to his ribs like contraband. He smelled like servers and cheap soap. I backed the repo history to an external, he said, eyes flicking to the door as if NDAs had legs. Screenshots of permission changes, commit hashes, timestamps, the day they pulled the rug. He showed us a terminal window like a confession, immutable, unfancy, true. Lila from the bank walked in next, the compliance officer who used to come to my night class to survive Excel. She wore flats you could run in and a face that does not accept. Oops. She didn't touch the coffee. You were right about the shells, she said, flipping her notebook to a page with a small map of arrows. Payments ping-pong through 3 LLCs with shared authorized signers. We've escalated. If we can tie beneficiary ownership to a decision-maker inside her house, I can keep the freeze long enough to claw back. We notarized what needed notarizing at the shipping store next door, fluorescent lights blessing the signatures with their ugly honesty. Marian drafted a preservation letter on the spot, instructing Kellen's outfit to lock logs, emails, and device images under pain of sanctions. Theo exported the Git logs while I imaged the old dev laptop, read-only, checksum displayed in a little black box like a heartbeat. I wrote the SHA 256 into my notebook because ink still counts where it matters. Marian assembled a timeline on legal paper, her pen scratching out the week like it had always been inevitable. Day of acquisition, first anomalous wire, repo permissions yanked, lawsuit served, wallet vanished, AML freeze. Lila added transaction IDs and swift references in tidy columns. Theo annotated with commit messages that read like a diary written by someone who doesn't expect to be read. Ava watched, absorbing courage by proximity, her hands flat on the wood as if ready to push. We file a declaratory action on authorship, Marian said. Preempt their suit. We move for a temporary restraining order on asset transfers out of the shells. We notify the board, on paper, not Slack. And we change your access, new email, new number, hardware keys you don't keep in drawers. What about Kellen? Ava asked, the name tasting different now. We let him talk, I said. On the record. We packed the evidence back into boxes that suddenly felt lighter, as if truth had its own helium. Outside, the morning had decided to be ordinary. We walked to the car with a briefcase, the drive, the notebooks, old tools, and a new war. This is the part where the story gets boring, I told her, turning the key. Boring wins. She nodded, a small, tired smile I recognized from the kitchen table years. We pulled into traffic like people who had somewhere better than a headline to be. We started with a lie that told the truth. Marian drafted an email from a burner account to Kellen's. Operations lead. Subject line. Lost wallet recovery. Urgent. The body was breezy and technical. A pretend vendor offering a boutique service to reconstitute compromised seed storage for high-tech clients impacted by recent events. It dangled just enough jargon to smell like a shortcut. Theo built the landing page in an hour, a login that didn't log in, a dashboard that did nothing but watch who came to visit. Kellen's team clicked within 11 minutes. The IPs traced to a co-working suite they used for overflow and a residential fiber line in a neighborhood where money wears yoga pants. Lila watched the traffic from the bank side, tracing the callback pings that tried to verify the service's escrow wallet. When the good faith deposit request triggered, we saw the first shape behind the curtain, an LLC with a Springwater name, newly minted, beneficial owner masked by a trust. It didn't act alone. Funds pinballed from that shell to a second one named after a bird, then to a strategic advisor, partnership that billed exactly $350,000 a month. The diagram began to look like a spider convinced of its immortality. We set the meeting at a private room in a hotel that confused quiet with expensive. Ava invited Kellen under the pretext of aligning on a communications reset after the freeze. He arrived on time with a face polished to a legal sheen. The fiancé texted he was stuck at the venue and sent a photo that could have been taken last week. Marian placed her phone face down but recording. Lila sat 2 blocks away at a banker's desk, eyes on the live flags that would ripple when the accounts moved. Theo took the chair by the ficus, his hoodie swapped for a collared shirt that made him look like a kid on picture day. Kellen opened with sympathy like a product. "It's been a challenging week," he said. "We're stabilizing." Ava poured water with hands that didn't shake. "Then explain the recovery path," she said. "And the advisors." He started the usual waltz. Legacy rails, velocity, boutique custody, and she let him finish the chorus before sliding a printout across the table. It was the map. Shells, dates, transfers, the boutique's escrow address, the advisory partnership, the fiber line. "Walk me through this," she said, voice flat, not a request. For a second, he looked at the paper like it might be hot. "These are standard intermediaries," he said. "Compartmentalization protects you." "From who?" she asked. "Me." Marianne coughed softly, a court reporter's metronome. "For clarity," she said, "can you confirm your authority to direct these transfers?" Kellen smiled the way a trapeze artist smiles at gravity. "We act on the company's behalf," he said, "with board-level visibility." "The board received none," Marianne said, sliding another page. "The preservation letter, the declaratory filing draft. We'd prefer not to involve a judge this morning." Lila's message buzzed my watch. Destination accounts live. SAR escalated. Hold requests filed. I texted back the code we'd agreed on. Proceed. Ava leaned in until the table hummed. "Reverse it," she said. "Everything. Now! And send me the advisory contracts." He chose bravado over retreat. "You're reacting emotionally," he said. "This could jeopardize." "The law will," Marianne said, and tapped her still-recording phone with one pink nail. He blinked, calculating the distance between performance and indictment. Theo, bless him, spoke from the ficus. "Also, you removed my commit history and reassigned ownership to a shell," he said, as if pointing out a typo. "I kept copies." The room breathed. Kellen's phone lit up, a notification he couldn't disguise. Transfer failed. Another buzz, frozen. His eyes flicked to Ava, and in that microsecond I saw it, the part of him that had never considered she might walk into a grocery lot at dawn and ask for help from someone who didn't want a percentage. He stood, straightened a tie that didn't need it. "We'll cooperate," he said, the word tasting like surrender. "Send your requests through counsel." "We already have," Marianne said. Outside the hotel, the city pretended not to notice. Ava exhaled like a diver breaking the surface. "Does this hold?" she asked. "It holds long enough," Lila said on speaker, keys clicking like rain. "And sometimes long enough is all you need to build the rest." Money doesn't clap when it comes home. It just appears in ledgers in silence. Lila called me from a number that didn't save and said, "Clawbacks posted," like a doctor reading a chart that finally runs out of fevers. The shells coughed up what they could. The advisory partnership went still, predatory grace giving way to paperwork. A wire I traced with my finger returned in reverse, numbers swimming upstream. I printed the confirmation pages and set them to dry on the motel desk like fish on newspaper. Marianne filed the declaratory action at 8:59. By lunch, the rival C&E had shrunk to a letter. She walked a paralegal through our timestamps, like a docent with a flashlight. Notebooks, drive image checksums, Git logs, the email where a younger Ava had written, "I think I found it." At 2:13 a.m., the subject line typoed because truth doesn't spell check itself. The other side sent a measured note about reassessing posture, which is how lawyers say we misread the calendar on which our bluff was written. By afternoon, they proposed mutual walkaways. Marianne circled a sentence, smiled with her teeth, and asked for fees. It ended the way some storms do, with clouds that pretend they were never there. The fiancé evaporated on contact with drought. He left a note that called her resilient, and a watch on the nightstand that ticked too loudly for anyone staying. A friend of a friend confirmed he decamped to a villa with reliable Wi-Fi and newer promises. I wondered how many photos he'd backlogged to drip out over the next month, loneliness scheduled for optimal engagement. Ava stared at the ring as if it might confess. Then she shut the box and handed it to me, not as possession but as disposal. I took it the way I take expired meds to the pharmacy, dangerous when left around. Kellen arrived with counsel and an apology that had been iron flat. He said, miscommunications and hypergrowth and Misaligned incentives. A bouquet of words that wilted on contact with air. Ava listened without blinking, then terminated him and breathed with cause, the kind of sentence that requires multiple copies and a notary stamp. Security badges stopped opening doors mid-swipe. A man I'd only ever seen behind sunglasses asked for a final paycheck, with a politeness I almost respected. The gatekeepers disperse like fog when the sun remembers its job. The sworn statement took longer than grief. We sat in a conference room cool to preserve the testimony. A court reporter typed like rain in a different climate. Ava told the story without embroidery, the way a good witness does. What she built, when she built it, who watched, what changed. She didn't reach for absolution. She named things. When they asked about me, who kept the notebooks, who pushed for the bank, who showed up with boxes, she glanced my way once, quick as a blink, then kept her eyes on the page. Pride is a quiet animal. It sat in my chest and didn't move. After, we walked out into a day that believed in itself. Trucks hissed by, someone argued with a parking meter, a buzz sighed. Ordinary life resumed its jurisdiction. Ava unlocked a new phone with a new number and typed 3 words to the team chat, the one Kellen didn't own anymore. We're back, cautiously. A minute later, hearts and rockets and little party cones. I put the spare key on my ring next to the one for the storage unit and the mailbox. It felt lighter than it had all week, as if it had relearned what it was for. We met in the quiet part of the afternoon, when the light comes in sideways, and even expensive houses forget to brag. She stood in the kitchen without armor, no stylist, no statement jewelry, hair pulled back like the old days. "I'm sorry," she said, the whole sentence no garnish. Not "I'm sorry you felt" or "I'm sorry but," just the kind that lands on tile and stays there. I nodded because forgiveness is a verb that likes patience. We made rules on paper. Not the kind you frame, the kind you actually use. She would be the founder, not the product. I would be the father, not the firefighter. Money decisions live on a calendar, not in a panic. Every signature gets 2 pairs of eyes, one of them boring. We hired a fiduciary who dresses like an accountant and talks like a pilot. Checklists, redundancies, no heroics. He diagrammed where every dollar sleeps and wakes. He doesn't do yachts or rockets. He does reconciliations. When he said, "We don't custody hope," I exhaled a laugh I hadn't earned in months. We cleaned the payroll and paid the vendors down to the penny. No expedite fees. No mystery discounts that breed favors. The devs got back their keys. Theo pushed a commit and wrote a message that made everyone clap at their screens. The bank took us off a watch list and put us on a first-name basis. Lila sent one final email that read like a weather report. Stable conditions. Monitor, not ignore. The foundation was Ava's idea and a dare to ourselves. No black boxes, she said. We set it up in a room with real windows. Grants posted publicly, audits on schedule, service providers named like actual people. Receipts live in daylight. The first check wrote itself to a night school that teaches kids how to read code and contracts. She signed it with the same wrist that once ached from shipping features. I watched her hand, steady now, and thought how power is just responsibility with a different haircut. We built a fence between work and us. Sunday dinners are phones in a bowl. I don't fix her problems in the first 15 minutes. She doesn't solve my age by renaming it. Sometimes we fail and laugh. Sometimes we just eat, which is also a kind of success. When I left that day, she pressed something small and cool into my palm. The spare key. Not as an invitation, not as a test. As a symbol with its boast removed. For emergencies, she said. And for casseroles. I put it on my ring beside the ones for the mailbox and the storage unit. It felt different now, as if trusts were the actual lock and this was only the ritual. On the drive back to the motel I didn't need the radio. The road made its usual music and the sky minded its business. Somewhere behind me, a glass house remembered how to be a home, and somewhere ahead of us, the story exhaled and made room for another day.